Biography of Mary Knowlton Coray Roberts, born the fourth child in the family on April 22, 1848 at winter quarters. Mary Knowlton Coray was the second of three children to come to Howard and Martha Jane Knowlton Coray while they were on their trek across the plains to join the main body of saints. The previous winter, 1847, was one in which so many babies died in winter quarters. Mary, though born in the spring, was a frail child, but through the blessings of the Lord, she survived the hardships of the desert and the plains. Hardship was to be her lot through much of her life, yet she met all of it bravely, with an uncomplaining spirit inherited from her mother, and she managed to fill her life with the intellectual, the truth, and the beautiful, the sweetness of which she learned from her outstanding parents. With the Coray family, she arrived in Salt Lake City in 1850 with the John Sharp Company at the age of 2 years. She was 9 years old when the family moved to Provo, and she experienced with them the privation of getting started in a new area and of grasshopper famine the following year. She remembered a good many things about her life in Provo and recounted them to her daughter Daphne years later. She remembered hanging on the fence that was around their home, watching the children playing in the street, and wishing she could go out and join them, for her mother kept her children very much to themselves. The one time that Mary looked forward to was when her father finished making the molasses for himself and the neighbors. Then he would let the children make candy of the last batch and have a candy pull. She and her sisters had a pet sheep. Once they sheared this sheep, washed and dyed the wool, spun thread, wove it into cloth, and then made themselves dresses, each sewing her own dress by hand, as they had no sewing machine. They were very proud of those dresses and got many compliments on them. As a child, Mary loved to spend long hours with her mother hearing of her experiences and of her pioneer life. Mary was always the one to fetch and carry for the family. If anyone said, "Somebody get me a drink," or "Why doesn't somebody close the door?" it was always Mary who ran to do it until, among the family, she was known as somebody. If anyone said, "Where's my hat?" Mary was the one to jump up and find it. It was this characteristic, along with her black eyes and dark hair and generally lovable disposition, that made her husband-to-be, Clark Roberts, declare when she was only 7 years old that he would wait for Mary until she was old enough to have him. Mary used to help in the field, as well as at home. All of the pioneer girls did at that time, but she was of delicate constitution, and this was a real hardship. At one time when food was scarce, her father saw that she was not well and sent her to the house, where she fainted just as she reached the door. Upon investigation, her mother learned that she had been giving her part of her ration of food to her younger sister. At 17, she began teaching school to assist in the family income. She taught in the building that still stands in the corner of the Provo 3rd Ward Chapel lot. An old lady in Provo told her daughter Daphne that she could remember as a child waiting with the other children to see her turn the corner coming from her home on 2nd South and then running to meet her. She remembered that her teacher had black hair and always wore a red rose or a red ribbon in it. She was an outstandingly pretty young woman, brilliant of mind like her parents. Her complexion was dark, her hair black, and her eyes showed her emotion. Years after her death, when her daughter Daphne, with her younger 2 sons, Claude and Lawrence, was inquiring among the old-timers of Provo about Howard and Martha Jane Knowlton Coray, many told of going to school under their pretty daughter Mary. One old lady told them that Mary was as good a lawyer as a teacher, and that many men went to get her to help them write legal papers. Daphne asked if she didn't mean Mary's mother, Martha, whereupon the old lady said crossly, "I know who I mean. It was that pretty black-eyed girl, Mary." She and her sisters always looked forward to the 3 wonderful occasions of the year: the 4th of July, the 24th of July, and Christmas. Then they could go to the ball. While her associations were few and of the select, the poor and humble remembered her understanding smile and kind deeds, and loved to tell about them. She spent some time as a young woman with her Aunt Mary Hooper, the wife of Captain William H. Hooper, in Salt Lake City, and there met many prominent people with whom she learned to converse freely upon many subjects. Her uncle, Captain Hooper, was quite proud of her intelligence. Since her mother was on the first board of directors of the BYU, and since the family was only allowed to associate with children of the best families, it is not surprising that Mary's natural talents were encouraged and developed to a high degree. She was married to Clark Roberts on July 24, 1866, in her father's home in Provo by Brigham Young himself, and they went to Salt Lake City the next day to be married in the endowment house. Immediately thereafter, she went with her husband to make a home on his ranch in Mona, Utah. She loved to ride with her husband, to debate with him, to dance with him, and to socialize. Wherever one was seen, the other was sure to be there also. Mary did not miss an opportunity to gain information and knowledge. Her husband was proud of her ability to grasp ideas, and he often joined her in her search for knowledge. Their main source of information was a leather-bound set of Chambers encyclopedias which they owned. 12 years later, on September 1st, 1880, Mary moved with her husband to Mancos, Colorado. Clark had answered the call for volunteers to go into the southern part of the state to make settlements. It was a perilous journey upon which to embark with 6 small children, but without a word she went where her husband led the way, leaving a sick mother behind. The day after they arrived in Mancos, sometime in October, it snowed 18 inches. That winter, the family migrated south to camp near the bank of the San Juan River in New Mexico, near the Colorado-New Mexico border. Mary's husband, Clark, had taken a job to work with the railroad through the winter, and they constructed a small cabin in the railroad camp on the bank of the San Juan. The next spring, sometime in April of 1881, the Roberts family moved back to Mancos and built a small cabin on Chicken Creek, where Clark had purchased the Wade Rock Farm. Clark also had the contract for carrying the mail from Mancos to Bluff, Utah. About this time, Mary received word that her mother was not well, and as the farm Clark had purchased had only a small cabin on it with no windows and a dirt roof and floor, it was decided that Mary should take the children with her back to Provo and take care of her mother through the winter, while Clark stayed and maintained his mail-carrying contract and built a better dwelling place. So, after about a year in the area and 3 months in Mancos, on September 6, 1881, Mary and her children retraced their journey from Mancos back to her home in Provo. She embarked on her return journey Wednesday, September 7, 1881. Mary's son, Clark, Jr., took charge of much of the responsibility for this trip, even though he was only 11 years old. They joined a group of travelers and camped a few miles north of Pint on Friday the 9th. The next day, the 10th, they made it to Lisbon and a little beyond before they had to camp. On the 11th, they camped at the foot of a hill which had the greatest variety of flint I ever saw, according to Mary. The next day, they made it to Cane Springs, where Mary sold a horse named Dave. On the 13th, they climbed a rocky, steep hill where a Mrs. Garner's horse broke its legs. They pressed on to reach the Grand Valley at dark. Mary had been suffering from illness to this point, at which she started to feel much better but retained a cough. They stayed over in the Grand Valley on the 14th and ate watermelons. On the 15th, they crossed the Grand River in safety and camped at Courthouse Rock. Saturday the 17th, they reached the Holes in the Rocks, where rainwater would collect in natural holes in the rock walls of a ravine, which was used for drinking water by its thirsty travelers. By the 18th, they had reached and crossed the Green River, where they stayed. The next day, they made it to Big Hole in the Rock. On the 20th, they traversed Little Holes in the Rocks and camped at Buckhorn Flat. Wednesday, the 21st, they reached Cottonwood Creek, where they camped. The 22nd and 23rd found them leaving Castle Valley and traveling on through the 24th until they arrived at Gooseberry on that evening. On the 25th, they made it to a place near North Bend. On the 26th, Clark Jr. went into North Bend to meet with his uncle Bolivar, then hurried back help the family make camp just after they passed through an Indian village in Thistle Valley. They made it down the Spanish Fork Canyon and home to Provo on Tuesday, September 27th. Mary said of her reunion with her mother on the 27th, "Oh, how timidly I entered the house not knowing how I should find Ma. But she was so she could talk to me and so highly appreciative of my company that I feel paid already for my trip. Met Nellie and family whom I had not seen for 3 years, which was no small pleasure. O merciful Father, help me to comfort and bless my mother. On December 14th, 1881, Mary's mother passed away, and after Christmas they moved in with Aunt Nellie Alexander, where Mary went through a very severe spell of sickness. On March 5th, 1882, they began their trip to return to Colorado by train. The train took a route that started from Ogden and went through Devil's Gate and then on to Evanston. After a 1-hour holdover in Evanston, the train moved on to pass over the Green River on the 6th. On the 7th, rode past Laramie and Colorado Junction. They passed through Denver at night and passed through a snowstorm which broke in the morning of the 8th when they passed Pikes Peak, the Garden of the Gods, and Colorado Springs. The train stopped in Pueblo for lunch and didn't start again until 9 o'clock. That night, they moved on to Horseshoe Bend and traveled through the night. On the 9th of March, they traveled through San Antonio and on through the day to El Magra Canyon, the Navajo and San Juan rivers, and on into Durango by dark. The train tracks that had been laid near Mancos over the time that Mary had been in Provo were placed, in part, by her husband and brothers. Clark had prepared a 2-room log house for his family and was waiting for them at the end of the line in Durango, Colorado, as the train pulled in. Great was Mary's relief and joy when, once again, she felt herself under her husband's protective care. They were among the first settlers of Mancos and did their part in establishing laws by which the town was to be governed. They joined their neighbors in establishing a night school, a debating club, and a Sunday school for all denominations to meet in to read and discuss the Bible. As Mancos was settled by rich, educated young men from the East who had come out west for adventure, this proved to be a very satisfying arrangement. Clark and Mary were the leading lights among them. After more Mormons came and settled in what was called the Weber, Clark was chosen to be the first superintendent of the Latter-day Saint Sunday School, and as their non-denominational meeting had been held on Sunday, he and Mary had to give up attending it. The debating club and the night school soon came to an end also. The other participants said that it was not the same without Mr. and Mrs. Roberts. In Mancos, Mary gave birth to 3 more children, Daphne and 2 sons, Don and Lou. Mary had always before, at the birth of her children, had her father and mother near her. Since she always had a long, hard time in confinement, it had been a comfort to her to have her father join her husband in giving her a blessing. In 1882, when Daphne was born, however, she did not have this comfort. Her mother was dead, and her father was far away. Neither was there a doctor in reach, nor a neighbor who had any experience in midwifery. So, when her time came, she had Clark give her a blessing and sent for a friend who stood beside her and did as she directed. Before they could have hoped, the ordeal was over and Mary directed the dressing of a baby girl who had come a month early. When the baby was only 3 days old, Mary learned that her little Frank, just 3, had curvature of the spine. This drove everything else out of her mind and heart, except doing for him and in years to come, was unable to recall anything at all about Daphne's babyhood. Clark and Mary were now living with their family in a 4-room log house, which was quite comfortable. The barn was full of good horses and cows with stacks of hay in the yard, of which many travelers going to and coming from distant parts, and cowboys coming in off the range were always welcome to. While men were enjoying the comforts of warm food and rest in the home, their horses enjoyed rest and feed in the barn. At conference time, the house and corral were always full. Clark had purchased some interest in the Provo woolen mills after he sold some sheep in Mona, and every winter, bolts of flannel cloth and woolen yarn came from the mills. From the cloth, the girls would all get dresses, and from the yarn, everyone got warm stockings and mittens. Mary made the stockings in different patterns, and the children all felt that their friends were jealous of the fine clothes their parents provided. The family missed this help very much after the mill was sold. Clark took the mail contract between Mancos and Bluff, riding through dangerous country with the Indians often on the warpath. There was only one trading post between the 2 towns. Clark gave a mule to a man at this post for hay so that he could have a place to rest and to feed his animals. One time, the 2 eldest boys took the mail for their father. It was a big responsibility for boys in their teens, and Mary did not enjoy seeing them start out on the trip, but her husband said they would be safe, so she did not say anything to make them think that it was dangerous. When they were returning home, they came to the trading post only to find the trader lying dead across his doorstep. They hurried on to tell a neighbor about it. He knew that there had been trouble between the trader and the Indians, but he did not know that they had killed him. He would not let the boys go on with the mail, but told them to go to bed, and he would keep them until their father could come after them. The boys were worried, as they had been taught, that the best way to get along with the Indians was to trust them. The Indians wanted them to go on because they said that if Uncle Sam's mail did not go through, he would blame them, and they did not want trouble with Uncle Sam. In the night, a young man who was a friend of the family came and asked the eldest boy, Orville, if he was afraid to go on with the mail. Orville replied that he was not and wanted to go on. The young man accordingly offered to accompany them. The boys, therefore, got up and left, arriving safely home about 4 o'clock in the morning. Not long after this, Mary's faith in her husband's knowledge of the Indians and good judgment were tested in a supreme fashion. Clark insisted that the mail must go through, and that, warring Indians or not, he would be safer if he and his family trusted the red men and showed that they were not afraid. In spite of the fact, therefore, that Eastern men were all gathering their families into a stockade, Clark asked Mary to stay at home on the farm, which she did, against all her neighbors' persuasion. After a sleepless night of hearing the Indians dance and whoop their war dances and chants, Mary was early next morning confronted with 3 Indian braves who asked for food. She told them to rest while she prepared their breakfast. They were stretched out on the floor by the fireplace and were sound asleep when she had their food ready for them. Not knowing how to awaken an Indian nor what to say, Mary took the broom handle and poked one of them in the ribs. He jumped up as though he had been shot. Then, seeing the humor in the situation, he took the broom and awakened his friends, laughing at their fright. They ate ravenously and then departed after indicating that they recognized the man in the picture over the fireplace as Clark Roberts, who, they said, was heap brave man. Later, when Clark returned, Mary was grateful to her Heavenly Father for giving her the strength to meet this test, for she found that the braves she had fed had saved her husband from an ambush and death. Once again, the Roberts built a new home, this time a frame home, the first in Montezuma County. Mary's father, Howard, came to visit them in August of 1884 and stayed until March of 1885 when he returned to Provo to work in the temple. On July 6, 1885, Mary was set apart as the Relief Society president in the Mancos branch. They were happy in this new home, where their last child, Louis, was born September 17, 1889. However, here trouble came. Clark lost his health. His hard life and early exposures had left their marks. He was taken with rheumatism so badly he could not work. Then the railroad made a survey through the place that came so near the house that it spoiled their home. He thought that a warmer climate might help him, so he sold the place to the railroad company and went south to New Mexico sometime in 1891. It is worthy of note that, not liking to record unpleasant things, Mary left out of her journal the years of struggling for a living in Jackson and Farmington. She and the girls worked the fruit fields and did whatever else they could to keep the family going during the years that Clark was suffering with rheumatism. On June 25, 1897, Mary made a journal entry about the pain she experienced when her son, Howard, had drowned in the San Juan River just in front of their house on June 15, 1897. They struggled through a few more summers before they decided they had had enough. Then they went to Red Mesa, Colorado in 1907. Daphne and Roy went to California, and Mary and Clark went to live near her in a big orange grove in Jamacha, California, near San Diego on March 12, 1912. Around February of 1913, Mary left the little cottage in the orange grove that was only a few yards from Daphne's house. She and Clark had been raising white leghorn chickens. They prepared a room for Louis, to join them in their home, but he stayed for only a short time. He was due to be in Salt Lake City to begin his mission to the Central States. They had a few happy days together, and, at this time, Clark came down with the disease that took his life on December 12, 1912. It seemed like he had just been waiting for Lou to come to help lay him away. Clark was 79 and Mary was 64 at the time. So after the funeral and with Lou gone, Mary could not feel happy, so she came back to Utah to renew her relationship with friends and relatives for a few years, then on to Colorado and New Mexico, where she spent her time until war broke out. Lou had built a little cabin on a dry farm upon which he was filing, and she wanted to go to it and help him. Her brother, William Coray, was there also, and she thought it was the place for her. She arrived March 7, 1916, where she was warmly received by the Red Mesa Relief Society. Thus the time passed for Mary, with the daily routine of cooking and cleaning and doing what she could to make life pleasant for her son Lou, what time he was there, and her brother Will. She appreciated every moment she spent with her children and grandchildren and loved them very much. Again, she helped organize a Sunday school that would take in all members of the community no matter what their creed, and took comfort in their friendship. It was a hard and lonely life, if she had ever thought of it that way, but she afterward remembered it as a happy spot in her life. Sometimes she was alone, and most of the time she was alone with her brother, Will, who loved her and did all he could for her comfort and happiness. When war broke out, Lou thought he would have to go, so he brought Mary to Vernal to her daughters, May and Daphne, and her son Frank, as they had all moved to Vernal during the spring before. Her daughter May fixed up a room for her where she could have her pictures and her books. Her heart, however, was so full of sorrow and disappointment for her family, all of which she felt worse about than they themselves did, but she wanted so much for her loved ones. When she passed away on May 19, 1923, she had at her bedside her youngest son, Louis, her daughters, May and Daphne, and a large family who was scattered about. Her last act was to bear her testimony to Clara Knoll, who was on a mission. As she signed her name, she fell from her chair, passing away 3 days later. She was conscious to the last. She had asked her doctor to do something for her so that she could live until Lou and Daphne got there. Daphne had gone to Diamond Mountain the day before, and Lou was away shearing sheep in Jensen.